John Herbert Dillinger was born on June 22, 1903, in Indianapolis, Indiana, into a working-class household. His father, John Wilson Dillinger, owned a small grocery store and was known for his strict, often inconsistent discipline. When Dillinger was just 3 years old, his mother died, removing the one stabilizing presence in his early life. After her death, Dillinger was raised largely by family members until his father remarried several years later. The arrival of a stepmother marked the beginning of long-standing tension inside the home. Authority in the household was rigid and unpredictable, alternating between harsh punishment and sudden leniency, creating an unstable emotional environment during Dillinger's formative years. As Dillinger entered his teenage years, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. He left school early and began working in a machine shop where he proved capable but restless. Outside of work, he fell in with neighborhood groups involved in fighting, theft, and other minor crimes, drawing repeated attention from local authorities. Concerned that the city was shaping his son in destructive ways, Dillinger's father sold his Indianapolis property and moved the family to a farm in Mooresville, Indiana. The change was intended to impose structure and discipline, but it had little effect. Dillinger continued staying out late, commuting back to Indianapolis, and clashing with his father. By the early 1920s, the attempted reform had failed, and Dillinger's relationship with both authority and family was deeply fractured. In 1923, facing growing tension at home and limited prospects, Dillinger enlisted in the US Navy. The decision appeared impulsive rather than patriotic, and military discipline proved no more effective than previous attempts at reform. After only a few months of service, Dillinger deserted his post while stationed in Boston, effectively ending his brief naval career. He returned to Indiana shortly afterward, unsettled and without clear direction. In April 1924, he married Beryl Hovius, a teenager from Mooresville, hoping marriage would provide stability. Instead, the couple struggled financially, and Dillinger found himself unable to secure steady employment. The combination of frustration, restlessness, and mounting pressure set the stage for his first serious criminal decision later that year. In September 1924, Dillinger joined an older acquaintance in an attempted robbery of a small grocery store in Mooresville. The plan was poorly executed and quickly unraveled. During the confrontation, Dillinger assaulted the store owner, and the pair were identified and arrested shortly afterward. When the case went to court, Dillinger's father urged him to confess and accept responsibility, believing honesty would result in leniency. Dillinger followed that advice and entered a guilty plea without securing strong legal defense. Instead of mercy, the court imposed a severe sentence of 10 to 20 years in prison, far harsher than those received by his accomplice or typical first-time offenders. The ruling marked a decisive break in Dillinger's life, replacing youthful recklessness with deep resentment toward the justice system. Dillinger entered the Indiana prison system as a young man with little experience beyond petty crime. Over the years, incarceration reshaped him. The long sentence bred anger and bitterness, and prison life gradually replaced any remaining faith he had in authority or fairness. Rather than rehabilitating him, confinement hardened his outlook and ambitions. Inside prison, Dillinger formed close relationships with seasoned criminals, including men who specialized in bank robbery. From them, he learned discipline, planning, and structure, how to study targets, assign roles, and execute robberies with precision. He absorbed these methods patiently, treating prison as a training ground rather than a punishment. By the time he became eligible for parole in 1933, Dillinger had transformed from an impulsive offender into a methodical criminal with clear intent and learned skills. Dillinger was released on parole in May 1933 after serving nearly 9 years in prison. He returned to civilian life during the depths of the Great Depression, facing limited job prospects and little support. Almost immediately, he abandoned any attempt at lawful work and turned to the skills he had refined while incarcerated. Within weeks, Dillinger began robbing banks across Indiana and Ohio, operating with confidence and speed. These early robberies showed a level of planning and coordination that distinguished him from common criminals. His sharp appearance, calm demeanor during crimes, and repeated escapes from capture quickly drew press attention. By the end of the summer, Dillinger had gone from recently paroled inmate to one of the most talked-about bank robbers in the Midwest. In September 1933, Dillinger's brief run of success came to a halt when he was arrested in Ohio and confined in the county jail in Lima while awaiting trial. During a search, authorities discovered documents suggesting an escape plan, but Dillinger denied any knowledge, maintaining a calm and cooperative appearance while incarcerated. Less than a month later, the plan unfolded. Several of Dillinger's former prison associates arrived at the jail posing as law enforcement officers, claiming they were there to transfer him back to Indiana for a parole violation. When Sheriff Jesse Saba questioned their credentials, he was shot and fatally wounded. The men freed Dillinger, locked up witnesses, and fled the scene together. The jailbreak reunited the core members of the gang and marked a sharp escalation in violence, transforming Dillinger's crimes from bank robbery into open warfare with law enforcement. Following the Lima jailbreak, Dillinger and his associates shifted from opportunistic robberies to a sustained criminal campaign across the Midwest. The gang targeted banks with increasing frequency, relying on speed, intimidation, and precise coordination to overwhelm small-town law enforcement before help could arrive. At the same time, they began raiding police stations and armories, not for money, but for equipment. These break-ins supplied the gang with automatic weapons, large quantities of ammunition, and bulletproof vests, giving them a tactical advantage over local police forces. The robberies grew bolder and more violent, and by the end of 1933, Dillinger's group was no longer seen as a loose band of criminals, but as a heavily armed organization capable of sustained resistance. As pressure from Midwestern law enforcement intensified, Dillinger and several members of his gang fled south, hoping distance would offer safety. They moved through Florida briefly, keeping a low profile while newspapers across the country continued to track their reported movements, often exaggerating their reach. The reprieve was short-lived. In late January 1934, Dillinger and key associates were staying in Tucson, Arizona, using assumed names. A fire at their lodging drew attention, and local authorities recognized several of the men from widely circulated photographs. Police arrested Dillinger and others without resistance, seizing weapons, cash, and equipment linked to recent robberies. The capture ended their southern escape and set the stage for Dillinger's return to custody under far heavier scrutiny than before. Dillinger was returned to Indiana and placed in the Lake County Jail at Crown Point, a facility publicly described by authorities as escape-proof. Guards were increased, procedures tightened, and officials openly dismissed the possibility of another jailbreak. Dillinger appeared compliant, following routines and avoiding confrontation while awaiting trial. On the morning of March 3, 1934, that confidence collapsed. Dillinger produced what he later claimed was a carved wooden gun, using it to intimidate guards and trustees. He locked several of them inside cells, seized real firearms, and walked out of the jail without firing a shot. Outside, he stole the sheriff's car and drove across the Indiana-Illinois state line. By transporting a stolen vehicle across state borders, Dillinger committed a federal offense, placing him directly under federal jurisdiction and transforming his pursuit into a nationwide manhunt. Following the Crown Point escape, federal authorities officially took control of the pursuit. The FBI organized a coordinated manhunt, circulating Dillinger's description nationwide and tracking reports across multiple states. Unlike earlier efforts by local police, this phase relied on interstate cooperation and continuous surveillance. During this period, Dillinger regrouped with a new circle of associates, forming a restructured gang better suited to constant flight. Among them was Lester "Babyface" Nelson Gillis, whose volatility contrasted with Dillinger's calmer approach. Together, the group resumed bank robberies, operating quickly and moving frequently to avoid detection. The crimes reinforced Dillinger's growing reputation while also tightening the federal net around him, as each robbery generated new witnesses, evidence, and leads. By late March 1934, Dillinger and Evelyn Frechette were living under assumed names at the Lincoln Court Apartments in St. Paul, Minnesota. Suspicion from the building's management led authorities to place the residence under surveillance, believing Dillinger was hiding there. When federal agents attempted to make contact, the situation escalated quickly. a confrontation in the apartment hallway turned into a gun battle involving Dillinger and several members of his gang. Amid the exchange of gunfire, Dillinger used a submachine gun to cover his escape. He was struck in the leg during the fight but managed to flee the building with Frechette through a rear exit. The failed arrest highlighted the growing danger of confronting Dillinger directly. Despite being wounded, he once again evaded capture, reinforcing his reputation for surviving encounters that might have ended another fugitive's run. After escaping the shootout in St. Paul, Dillinger traveled back to Mooresville, Indiana, where he sought refuge at his father's home. There, he remained out of sight while recovering from the gunshot wound to his leg. The visit was brief but significant, marking one of the last times Dillinger would return to his childhood home. Once his condition stabilized, Dillinger left Mooresville and separated from Evelyn Frechette. Soon after, Frechette was arrested by federal authorities on charges of harboring a fugitive. She was later convicted and sentenced to prison. Her arrest removed one of Dillinger's closest allies and emotional supports, further narrowing his circle and increasing his isolation as the manhunt intensified. On April 22, 1934, federal authorities received a tip that Dillinger and several associates were staying at the Little Bohemia Lodge, a remote resort in northern Wisconsin. The location appeared ideal for a surprise arrest, and FBI agents moved in quickly, traveling overnight to surround the property. The operation unraveled almost immediately. As agents approached the lodge, gunfire erupted, alerting those inside. Dillinger and his companions escaped through the rear of the building under cover of darkness, slipping past the perimeter before it was fully secured. During the confusion, Special Agent W. Carter Baum encountered Babyface Nelson at a nearby cabin and was shot and killed in a sudden exchange of gunfire. The failed raid was a major blow to federal efforts. Dillinger once again vanished, while the death of an FBI agent underscored the growing danger of the pursuit and intensified pressure on authorities to end the manhunt decisively. By May 1934, Dillinger recognized that his notoriety made continued flight nearly impossible. Photographs of his face were widely circulated and his movements were closely watched. To reduce the risk of identification, he arranged for surgical procedures intended to alter his appearance and obscure his fingerprints. While hiding in Chicago under an assumed name, Dillinger underwent facial modifications that removed identifying marks and adjusted his features. Additional procedures damaged the skin of his fingertips in an effort to interfere with fingerprint recognition. During this period, he lived quietly, avoiding robberies and limiting contact with former associates. The strategy allowed him a short period of anonymity, but it also confined him to a narrow routine that would soon draw unwanted attention. In June 1934, federal authorities escalated their response by officially designating John Dillinger as America's first public enemy number one. The announcement was both symbolic and strategic, signaling a shift toward aggressive federal pursuit and making Dillinger the primary focus of national law enforcement efforts. A substantial cash reward was offered for information leading to his capture, and his name and image were circulated more widely than ever before. Newspapers across the country amplified the designation, further cementing Dillinger's notoriety. While the label was intended to isolate and pressure him, it also ensured that anonymity was no longer possible, tightening the net around his final weeks in hiding. In early July 1934, Dillinger began spending time with Anna Sage, a brothel operator who was facing imminent deportation. Aware of his identity and the reward attached to his capture, Sage saw an opportunity to use her proximity to him as leverage with federal authorities. Sage contacted the FBI and offered detailed information about Dillinger's whereabouts and habits, in exchange for financial compensation and assistance with her immigration case. As part of the arrangement, she agreed to make herself visible to agents during a public outing so they could identify Dillinger with certainty. Her cooperation provided federal agents with their most reliable lead in months and set a controlled trap that depended on timing, visibility, and Dillinger's own sense of routine. On the evening of July 22, 1934, Dillinger went to the Biograph Theater in Chicago, accompanied by Anna Sage and Polly Hamilton. Federal agents had already positioned themselves around the building, acting on Sage's information and watching closely for her identifying signal among the crowd. After the film ended, Dillinger exited the theater and turned toward a nearby alley. As agents moved in, he realized what was happening and attempted to escape, reaching for a weapon as he fled. Multiple agents opened fire, striking him from behind. Dillinger collapsed just outside the theater, fatally wounded. The ambush ended the nationwide manhunt in a matter of seconds, concluding Dillinger's final attempt to outrun federal authorities. After being shot outside the Biograph theater, Dillinger was transported to Alexian Brothers Hospital, where he was pronounced dead later that night. News of his death spread rapidly, drawing crowds to the scene and dominating headlines across the country. For many, the manhunt's abrupt end felt both shocking and inevitable after months of pursuit. Dillinger's body was returned to Indianapolis, where he was buried at Crown Hill Cemetery in a heavily attended funeral. Authorities took precautions to prevent grave tampering, reflecting both his notoriety and the public fascination surrounding his death. In the days that followed, arrests and prosecutions continued against those who had aided him, while law enforcement framed his killing as a decisive moment, signaling the decline of the gangster era and the rise of stronger federal crime enforcement. In the years following Dillinger's death, federal courts prosecuted dozens of individuals for harboring, aiding, or financing him and his associates. These convictions reinforced the message that assisting high-profile criminals would bring serious consequences, marking a shift toward broader accountability in organized crime cases. Despite official confirmation of his death, Dillinger quickly became the subject of enduring myths. Claims circulated that he had escaped and that another man was killed outside the Biograph theater. These theories persisted largely due to his altered appearance and the secrecy surrounding the manhunt's final moments. However, fingerprint comparisons taken before and after his death confirmed the identity of the body beyond doubt. Over time, Dillinger's story came to symbolize both the peak and the collapse of the Depression-era outlaw, as public fascination with gangster figures gave way to expanded federal power and modern law enforcement methods.